Good morning, South Africa. I'm Tami Ngubeni. This is the South African Morning as we edge our way towards 9 o'clock. It is now 8:45. Here's something that I would love for us to be discussing this morning. Now, some of South Africa's prisoners continue to experience treatment practiced during the apartheid era. The Judicial Inspectorate found that some prisoners are kept in solitary confinement with no human contact at all. Some of them being kept in solitary confinement by up to 10 or 9 years. Now, despite the harsh practice being banned in 2008. Now, it's also worth noting that this goes against the United Nations Nelson Mandela rules for prisoner treatment. For more on this, let's bring in Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services, Justice Edwin Cameron. Justice Cameron, good to be talking to you once again this morning. When we think about solitary confinement, we think, I guess, of who many would call prisoner number one, and that's the late Dr. Nelson Mandela. In prison for 27 years, spent 18 of those years largely in solitary confinement in Robben Island. But there is a difference between solitary confinement and segregation, which is also something that we'll be talking about today. But what is that difference? Because to the layman, the layperson, it's one and the same.
And very good morning to ENCA's viewers. It's a pleasure to be talking with you about this. First of all, Tami, let's just deal with the question you've just asked. Segregation is permitted under the Correctional Services Act. Some people ask for segregation voluntarily if you're at risk, or if, for example, if you self-identify as LGBTIQ, or if you want to study. So that is permissible segregation, and if a prison can accommodate you, they'll put you in a single cell. Solitary confinement is very different. It's defined internationally as being kept alone in a cell without meaningful human contact for 23 hours a day. Now, we went to Ebongweni, we went to Pretoria C-Max, we went to Mangaung Max, and we found at the first two institutions that solitary confinement was being practiced against the law, because the initial Correctional Services Act envisaged some forms of solitary confinement, but that was taken out of the statute, as you rightly noted for our viewers, in 2008. Now, let me make an important point, Tami, if I may. We recognize that some of the people being kept in solitary at Ebongweni, which is in a remote place, remote for us urbanites, in the northeastern Cape, very southern KwaZulu-Natal. We recognize that at Ebongweni and Pretoria C-Max, they are very dangerous people, some of them. But we made submissions to the department to say, however dangerous these people are, some of them are alleged to be, some of them are admittedly gangsters, you don't have to do what you're doing. We made suggestions, practical suggestions for alleviating the confinement so that it wouldn't amount to internationally and constitutionally prohibited solitary confinement. Now, we haven't had feedback on that yet. We're looking forward to meeting the National Commissioner. He set up, when he came in, a National Commissioner Makoti, Tobukhale Makoti. He set up regular meetings with us. We haven't always been able to have them for various contingencies, but we appreciate those meetings, and we're going to raise this with him next week. We want to know whether alleviating steps have been taken so that there's some easing of the conditions. May I just add, Tami, and then I'd love to hear your next question. What I want to add is that solitary confinement is extremely cruel. It is well documented that it has a devastating impact on the health, the physical health, the physiological health, and the mental health, worse, of those subjected to it. So it eventually it becomes a torture, and it's defined under the International Torture Treaty, to which we are party as South Africans.
And that does actually, Judge Cameron, that does actually lead me to my next question. The reason why you are protesting against this and the reason why the United Nations has made this to be, I guess, a crime against humanity and has labelled it as something inhumane, is that because your approach to the correctional systems is that it should be restorative as opposed to punitive? Is that the edge that you are leaning on here?
Very much so, Tammy. And, you know, this doesn't come from my inspectorate's pie in the sky approach. It comes from the statute. It comes from Nelson Mandela's mandate to the statutory drafters in 1998 that we would turn a new leaf on imprisonment. We would make imprisonment educational, rehabilitative, and reintegrative so that you go back into your community enhanced with education and rehabilitation. And alas, that's not happening. But you're quite right. That's our approach. There is space in the statute for punishment when you do something, and it's a difficult situation to run a prison. There are opportunities and processes for punishment, but default solitary confinement of hundreds of people, as occurs at Pretoria CMAX and Ebongweni cumulatively, we say is wrong. It's counterproductive. It's damaging. It doesn't do anyone any good, least of all
Judge Cameron, let's focus on the individuals who would be found themselves, you know, put in segregation. You mentioned a bit earlier on that these are individuals who have committed hardcore crimes. Is restoration, is rehabilitation possible for those who are murderers, for those who are rapists? What do the statistics say? What do the surveys and the reports say regarding this?
It's a good question, Tammy. I'm one of those generations who saw the Hannibal Lecter film with Jodie Foster in it, and there are some people who are very difficult, if not incapable of rehabilitation, but they're extremely rare. Most people are capable of rehabilitation. Some of them, we don't deny that at the Judicial Inspectorate. Some crimes require very long imprisonment. Some crimes may require almost indefinite imprisonment, but they're relatively rare. Our approach in the statute, we commend the approach of the statute, is to seek to rehabilitate. And there are positive methods that we can do. We've got a parole system that assesses the prisoners. So my own belief is that most people, under the appropriate circumstances, with the right rehabilitative programs, are capable of rehabilitation and reintegration into their communities.
We'll leave it at that for this morning, Justice Cameron. Lovely talking to you. And I think a lot of food for thought as well coming from that conversation. One would want to find out why the law is being broken, even within the correctional services. But I guess that is a conversation for another day. Prisoners in isolation for more than 9 years. And this is clearly against the human rights and against the UN and the statutes that have been put in place as per Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services. Justice Edwin Cameron has stated for us.